right, folks, lovely to see you all today. Believe we have a great mix of students here today. We've got Dr. Osborne's class and a few master students thrown in and some other guests. So lovely to see you. I'm Ross Stewart. I'm the interim dean of the business school here, Business, Government and Economics, and we're thrilled to welcome you to our first Dean Speaker Series event. For this year, we have one of these events every quarter, and so you're very privileged to be part of this, and it coincides nicely with your class time. And the value proposition around this event is to bring important business leaders to our classroom and to kind of bring the business world in here. We're encouraging you always to be going out and finding that internship, that relevant experiential learning as you go through our time here. But this time, we're very privileged to have kind of the business world coming to us right here in our classroom. And so I'd like to introduce to you Mr. Orlando Ashford. He is the president of Holland America. He has been at Holland America for about 2 years? 1 year.
1 year.
1 year
A
now.
year in December.
And he's had an interesting background in his lifetime of work. He's worked for Coca-Cola, and he was placed in Istanbul for many years, and he would manage all of the HR function, the human resource function and organization for all of Africa and Eurasia. And so you imagine that's what, about 100 countries or so?
Yeah.
And so Mr. Ashford has developed over that time amazing, what I would call global acumen, and he might talk to you a little bit about that today. The other thing is that he has worked for Mercer, which is a large consulting firm in the HR function. And so he has kind of come into business through the human resource side of things. And that might be an approach you might think about in your career. And now he's developed into this role as more of a president, CEO role of managing the whole organization. And so we're delighted to have him here. He has his academic background is from Purdue University, has an undergrad degree there and a master's degree from there. And we're just very fortunate. I would suggest the whole Seattle community is very fortunate to have a person like this who's come into our midst. So welcome, Mr. Ashford. I'll hand over to you.
All right, so no pressure. You said like I need to be like inspirational and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to try and work on that. So good morning.
Good morning.
It's a little slow. Okay, we didn't have any coffee yet. So let's try it again. Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, great. So here's the deal we have to cut. So I have an hour. I'm here to be of service to you. So I have like about 212 slides that I could go through slide by slide, or we could get into a bit of a dialogue. And so I prefer dialogue. It's a little more fun for you and more fun for me. I do have some things that I want to chat with you about, but I'm here to be of service to you. So anything that you want to talk about, some of the concepts that I'll share with you, some things that's on your mind, I would encourage you to take advantage of it, because I got to go back to work, okay, after this. And so we'll agree to do that. So thanks for the opportunity and the introduction. As was said, I am president of Holland America Line. How many people here have been on a cruise? That's pretty good. How many people have been on Holland America? All right, not as good. So as was mentioned, my career has been one coming up through the HR ranks. I started my career with Anderson Consulting. I was in consulting for a number of years, doing organizational development, leadership, and human resources consulting. Did that for a bit, and then I worked for a company called Ameritech in Chicago, was an internal consultant. I left there, I moved to New York. I worked for a consulting company called Delta Consulting, which was a boutique consulting firm that focused on consultation to CEOs in the C-suite. Did that for a number of years, became a partner there, then left, went to work for Motorola. How many people here remember the Razor phone? Okay, I'm not that old yet. So I was part of the team that brought that phone to market. There was about 4 of us responsible for execution and delivery of that phone. If I had negotiated better, I wouldn't be standing here, because I could have retired off of what we delivered. We took the stock from $7 to $26 off the back of that phone, and actually taught Apple that concept of how to bring a new phone to market. Because what people do not know is that Motorola and Apple originally had agreed to do the iPhone together, but the two CEOs got into a little bit of an argument over revenue sharing, and so Apple said, forget it, we'll do it ourselves. It took about 5 extra years, They developed the iPhone themselves, and then the rest is history. Motorola's not exactly around anymore. We could talk about that. So I left Motorola, then I went to work for Coca-Cola. How many people here have heard of Coca-Cola? Everybody's heard of Coca-Cola. Started in Atlanta. They sent me to Turkey. I lived in Istanbul, Turkey for about 2.5 years. As was mentioned, ran human resources for Eurasia and Africa, so managed everything from Moscow to Cape Town. So did a lot of traveling. We can talk a little bit about living and working abroad. I think that's something you should all consider or plan to do if you have not done so already. This is a global environment, and so you want to get a head start in being prepared to do that. I could share some stories there. Then I left from Coke. I moved back to the US, and I was head of HR for a company called Marsh & McLennan Companies. How many of you have heard of that company? Yeah, that's good. That's an insurance and consulting firm. So I was CHRO for about 5 years, and then I had a boss that thought I could do more than HR, and so he encouraged me to take on a business leader role, and so I moved into Mercer. I was president of the talent business, so I ran a global consulting business, consulting on talent issues, executive compensation issues, and things like that. Did that for a couple of years, and then was recruited into this job, and so somebody was crazy enough to ask me to lead a cruise line. And so the funny thing is, I started this job December 1st, and I took my very first cruise December 5th. And so I had never been on a cruise, never been on a cruise ship, I never thought about taking a cruise, but decided I'll be CEO of a cruise company. That makes sense. So we could talk about how that happened as well. And so I'm from the East Coast originally, so new to the Seattle area. So far, so good. I have 2 kids, 15 and 10. What's starting to get scary is that I can envision in a few years I'll come into a room like this and my son will be looking at me. But that's another story. That's my issue. So anyway, so that was me. That's actually me on one of my ships. And so there's 15 ships in my fleet. We cruise the entire world, so we go to over 400 ports, 120 countries, all 7 continents. We have over 500 unique itineraries that we do every year. So it's one of the things that's exciting about this job. And so it's funny, while I had never been on a cruise ship, there's a lot of things I've done in my career that prepared me for this opportunity. So one, living and working all over the world. So while I have ships that deploy all over the world, most of the places my ships go, I've been in a different context, whether socially or professionally, but it helps. In fact, next week I'll be flying to Istanbul because I have 2 ships that are going to be in Istanbul, and I'll be hosting some of our guests. And so I'm flying 14 hours to go to dinner and then flying back the next day, but I'm going to host 2 of our ships in Istanbul. And so the way we marketed it is that our president, who used to live here, wants to take you to one of his favorite restaurants, not knowing how many people would respond, and quite a few did. So I'm off to Istanbul to go to dinner in a couple weeks. But that's an old experience playing out in a new experience. So a couple of things we can talk about today that I brought, this book that I wrote called TalentISM, which I'll get back to in a second. And I'll talk about some of the things that I'm seeing and what's happening in the workplace. So again, my career has been focused on human resources, so that's most of my experience. And I'm running a business from an HR perspective, but there's some messages that I would share with you as people that are in school and that will be thinking about coming into the workplace here soon, some things that you might want to think about as you start mapping out your career. And so what I'll call a disconnect between how we find people, filter people, identify talent, the way the workforce is going to look in the future, the way we hire, and then time to answer any questions that you have. So this concept of talentism, how many people have heard the term capitalism? You all have. That's why we're here. We're here in America, so we think about it. Well, the idea is that capitalism is being replaced by talentism. So it's actually easier to get money than it is to find the right people to execute and deliver whatever it is your business value proposition is. And so as organizations struggle with that, this idea of talentism being the big differentiator in an organization is the thing of the future. So as you think about your career, as you think about the business that you want to start, as you think about the world that you want to move into, human capital is probably the most important thing to think through. Dollars, traditional capital, actually is much easier. In my time, it was all about the dollars? Can you get someone to give you the money? There's money floating around. Can you get the people to help you execute, innovate, deliver? That's my book. Buy one, it's okay. So about, I guess 2 years ago, so I do a lot of public speaking like this. People have encouraged me to take some of my thoughts and put them in a book. It's one of those things that I always put off and put off and put off. And about 2.5 years ago, for a New Year's resolution, I said I'm going to write my book. And so I did, and we launched that about a year ago, just in time for me to leave my other company and start a new job. So all this money actually goes to my old company, but that's okay, because I wrote this book when I was at Mercer, and so it's focused on that. But a lot of the things that I talk about in this book, I believe in personally and are applicable, and they're still applicable even in what I do. And so again, the notion that human capital drives growth for business and for people. And so this is something I personally believe in. And so while I'm not in the HR business anymore, I still talk about a lot of the things I wrote in this book. All right. So the first concept, the disconnect between the skills that people have versus the skills that employers need. So today in the world, there are over 200 million people actively looking for work, yet 34% of companies say that they're struggling to find talent in their jobs. That doesn't make sense. That seems like a lot of people. And so I would suggest that there is an inefficient filtering system for how we identify and discover talent. Now, you are working your way through that filtering system by doing what? Going to college, right? Because one of the things they say, it's important to get a good education. That's one of the ways to distinguish yourself and position yourself for some of those opportunities. More than 1/3 of employers cannot fill the available jobs. And so there is and then the jobless rate for younger people. So two things. One, we have to figure out how do we position more people to have access and opportunity to go to college, to demonstrate their capability. The other thing, when I talk to corporations, is I encourage them to think differently about how they assess and evaluate people and talent. Because if you believe that talent is equally distributed across all people, but not every person has the same opportunity to demonstrate that talent. So I'll share a story. So I presented at the World Economic Forum a couple of years ago and was talking about this concept. And so a lot of universities are putting their curriculum online, these MOOCs. All right, so MIT, for example, has put a lot of their technical curriculum online. So if you have two individuals, one goes to campus, like yourselves, goes to class every day and gets a degree, and you have another individual that does it online, which one's better from a hiring perspective? Anyone have a point of view? The one that went to the physical degree? Okay. Anyone else agree with that? Everyone agrees with that. Why? Because you guys are all here. Okay, so I said in that same example, if you took because I asked a question and most people said that the person that was on the campus at MIT is a better student, is a better product. And I said, why? And so this one woman says, well, because that person went to class, had to negotiate managing their schedule, learning how to balance work and social, had to do their own laundry, and go to class and study and get a degree. I said, those are all valuable and viable. What if I told you that this person lived in a very small remote village, had to take care of ailing parents, 2 children, had to walk a mile each way to get water, had to wash their clothes by hand, and late at night walked up a hill and went to a hut where there was a little light and a computer, and that's where she did her classes. Which one's better? The room got quiet like this. And so it's context. People have different contexts, personal trails in which they're able to build up a certain skill set, the technical skill set, but also that picture around them. What experiences did you have? What part of the world did you grow up in? What did you have to manage in order to deliver yourself? And I think all of those things are important, and those are all things that corporations are learning to assess when they determine whether a person is a good fit for a job or an opportunity. Does that make sense? So one of the ways I would encourage you to think about your career, it's almost like writing a book. And how interesting is each chapter in your book? And so we sometimes get very formulaic in how we think about managing our career. Check. I need to get this degree. Check, I have this GPA. Check, that counts as something that is extracurricular. But is there passion in your story? Does it read really well? Is it a good story? And you want to test it, because that's essentially what you're pitching, is your life story. And then somebody's going to be intrigued by that and say, wow, I want to work with him or her. That's an amazing story. Not only did they go to a good school and are they smart and blah, 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 but there's some context to them that's intriguing that I think will add extra value. It's almost like building your brand. That make sense? How many people here Google themselves regularly? Really? You guys don't? What comes up? Does anything come up? Because the first thing employers do is Google you. And so to get your story. That's interesting. I do. I'm an old guy. So something you should think about. What comes up? Because that's what you're building is a story. Is this true? Yeah, some head nods. Millennials put more emphasis on the people they work with, work they find exciting, and good mentorship. Yeah? In my experience, that's sort of what I'm finding. I work with, as you can imagine, a cross-section of people. There's a young lady that was my chief of staff, very talented, and I love working with her, but she used to wear me out because she wanted feedback every day. How'd I do today? I still love you. You were great yesterday and you're great today. It's really okay. I'm not giving you a raise today. So that's something that I noticed, this idea of relationships, people, connectivity, this idea of mentorship. So a piece of advice I'll give you, my experience, you don't want one mentor, you want a collection of mentors. So the way I think about it is you want to create your own personal board of directors. Who are those people that will give you raw, unfiltered advice that will make you a better person, a better leader, a better executive, better junior executive, whatever that is. And you'll have different people that you'll tap into at different points in time because they'll add different value. I find I do talks like this, and inevitably somebody will walk up to me afterward and say, wow, would you be my mentor? Don't do that, that's weird. That's just like saying you're walking around, you see somebody across the room, they're cute, and you walk up to them and say, hey, you're cute, let's get married. That'd be weird, right? It's the same thing. Because a mentorship, that's a personal relationship. Now, what I would encourage you to do is if you find someone that's intriguing and you think could teach you something, would you have 30 minutes for a cup of coffee so I could ask you 3 questions? That would be helpful to me if you could do that. You'd be amazed who'll give you 30 minutes. You'll freak people out if you ask them to be your mentor right off the street. Right? So think about that. I've watched TV, I saw a show, I thought that person would be interesting. I wrote them a letter, I'd asked for 30 minutes and a cup of coffee. You'd be amazed at who you can get to do that with you. And then if you do good in your 30 minutes and your cup of coffee, then maybe you can start a relationship and add them to your personal board of directors. That's a tip you should manage the rest of your life. I've got a good 10, 15 people that would tell you they're vested in my success, and they all play different roles at different points. The chairman of the board for my personal board is my mom. Right? My mother, when I was in college, she would always ask me what was I reading. I never thought anything about it. I would just say, well, Mom, I'm reading this, I'm reading that, I'm reading this. 10, 15 years later, I'm at my parents' house, and I'm rummaging through the cupboards, and I find all my college books. And I think that's weird because my college books are at my house. And what I realized is my mother had been buying all my books and was reading them so that she could give me motherly advice in the context of what I was going through. So I'm lucky. She's pretty special. But I tap into her, even at this point in time, to help me think about in managing my career. Who are those people in your life? Some will be family, some will be random, some will be people that you've worked with, but you want to create a personal board of directors that will help you in this managing mentorship, in determining what exciting things you can add to your story as you position and pitch your story throughout your career. And again, this emphasis on people, so this should be a natural extension of that. Does that make sense? All right. You guys buy this? Across the entire workforce, the work and the people who do it will become increasingly mobile, virtual, and project-based. So in my book, I actually predict that corporations will go away in time. This idea of entity amassing 10, 15, 20, 50, 100,000 people under our umbrella and saying, I have this army of individuals, that's starting to change because things are much more interchangeable where you can plug in. I'll give you an example. So I talk about this in the book. So my 15-year-old son, who was 13 at the time, he's talking to his mom, and he says, I don't want to work like Dad, which I took a little bit personal because we have a pretty nice life. So you don't like all this, son? But what he said was, Dad has to wear the suit. Dad always has to travel. Dad's always under pressure. I don't want to live like that. So I said, well, so what are you going to do? Right? Because I know you have expensive tastes because I fund them. He says, well, Dad, I'll do something like, that's more flexible, like apps. And I'll live off of that. Now, I started to go into this speech that my father gave me. I remember it because I was an artist when I was young. I could sit with a pad of paper and a picture and I could freehand recreate a picture. I was really good. And I had declared I was going to be an artist. And my father then explained how, artists don't make any money. You're going to do something in math and science and blah, blah, blah. And there went my art career. So I was about to go into that speech when my son said, I'm going to do apps. And literally, apps. And I started and I caught myself. And I stopped. I said, well, let's discuss this again. So here's what I did. So I figured in order to understand where he was coming from, I needed to experience it myself. So myself and one of my good buddies, we designed and created our own app. I'm not promoting what I'm about to share with you, but the app is called Cigar Finder. I collect cigars. And so we created an app that if you're traveling anywhere in the country, and now we just expanded it to include Europe, you can find a cigar-friendly establishment or find a cool cigar and sit and enjoy, and we rate them in the whole bit. So if two middle-aged businessmen with no technical experience can figure out how to do an app, then my son could, and could probably make a living doing that. So I never gave him my speech, and so now I encourage him. But the point of that story is that this idea of mobile and virtual, so how we actually did the app, we posted the project online. We found a firm in India. A bunch of firms bid on it. We found a firm in India to bid on writing the code. We found a guy in Romania to do my webpage. Put all that together, pitched it to iTunes. They approved it. Boom. And so if any of you download, I get $1. And so that's sort of how the world is starting to work. You have a skill set. That skill set will have value in the marketplace. You can plug into a system, execute and deliver value for which you are paid. You get rated for how well you deliver that value. You can unplug and then take that new value and go someplace else and plug in and do it again. And that's kind of where we're moving. I know, this contrast between, and I'm a person that's an employer and I want people to come and stay at Holland America for extended periods of time, but that dynamic is changing. The idea of coming and working 20, 30, 40 years is shifting a lot. And so for many of you, some of you will find a place and plug in and do that for 20 or 30 years. I would bet that most of you will go someplace for 5 years, for 10 years, for 7 years, and will work in multiple places. And so you'll want to prepare for that. Again, it's back to this storytelling. Each job that you take is a chapter in your story. So before you take a job, before you take an internship, before you take an opportunity, what story does that tell? Is it a good story? Is it an intriguing story? You've heard some of my stories, right? So when I tell people I was presented with an opportunity to go to London or to go to Istanbul, I chose Istanbul because I thought that was a better story. It was going to be more of a challenge. So that was a little insight into how I think. London would have been great. It's a great city. I love London. But I think would have been less impressive. So when you hear he lived in Istanbul, he ran 90 countries, he ran everything from Moscow to Cape Town, most people go, wow. London would have been a cool story, but this was a better one. That's how it worked for me. And that's how I think about job opportunities. That make sense? Okay. So this idea of more value will be placed on individuals' networks, not just their skills. This is a big one. So there's some research being done at NYU, and they're trying to help evaluate someone's network. So when I hire two people, and it's easy to think about in a sales job, right? If I'm bringing in two people, this person has 10 friends, this person has 100 friends. The person with 100 friends, you would assume, would add more value in a sales job. But they're applying that thinking to all jobs, because you're not just hiring the individual and the things that that individual knows, you're also hiring their network and the access that they can get to other ideas or thoughts or information. And so there's research being done to try to figure out how to put value on those networks, and companies are trying to figure out how to leverage the best networkers within their organization and value them more. Think about this, because it's very different. We've been taught and trained, it's about the tick list of things that you know as an individual. I got an A, you got a B, I'm better. I got a B, you got a C, I'm better than you. And we stack rank ourselves that way. This is about, well, I might have gotten a C, but I have a collection of people around me that's way bigger than yours. And so that collection allows me to be more influential and more powerful and deliver more value than the person that got the A by themselves. Very different concept. And that's where organizations are going. Research suggests, actually more than suggests, proves that a network, a term I like to use at my facility, is this idea of collective intelligence. A group will always outperform an individual, no matter how smart the individual. That's how I manage my team. So we work on collective intelligence. I like brainstorming, idea sharing, idea generation, because I believe that if I get 10 or 15 people tackling a problem, I'll beat my competitor who's maybe got one or two. And so that plays into this concept here. Individuals and organizations that can best leverage networks have a competitive advantage. A person that can best leverage their network adds more value, would be more valuable than that really smart individual. Okay? I just laid a big one on you. Hopefully you got it. So these are some things when I talk to employers that I tell employers that they should think about doing. So I just talked about this, valuing individuals' networks, not just individual skills. Open the mind of their organization. All right, so I had yesterday we had this big employee event, and the whole intention of the event was to do just that, open the minds of the organization. So it's one thing if I can get myself and my 7 or 8 direct reports thinking collaboratively. It's another thing if I can get all 16,000 of my employees thinking collaboratively. So we've done things like hosting innovation sessions. I'll do a lot of open dialogue with employees. I'll encourage people to send me ideas. I'll give prizes for people who give the best idea. All of those are intended to open up the mind of the organization. Because if I can more effectively leverage my network of 16,000 better than my competitor, my business will win. At the individual level, what can you do? Be a power networker. And power networking is more than just collecting business cards or linking in with as many people as possible. So it's not about amassing a list. It's about actually establishing real connection. So what happens to me a lot, I get so many people that want to link in with me because they see my title. President, that'd be cool to be linked in with him. I don't know you. So having a real connection so that you can leverage your network and extract information and power from your network comes from having a real connection. One of the best ways to create real connection, this will be a good tip, is to offer something to someone versus just looking for something. I get hit up all the time, right? Hey, Orlando, does your business want this? Hey, do you want a marketing list? Hey, do you want this? Hey, could you give me this? Hey, could you, hey, I need a job. Hey, I need, and then every once in a while, somebody will say, hey, Orlando, could I do this for you? So guess what? I always read that email because it's just refreshing. Somebody wants to do something for me? Doesn't happen. And then instantaneously, I'm trying to do something for them. So the best way to establish your network and establish connection is to see if there's a way to establish an opportunity for you to do something. It can even be small, because most people will then instantly want to reciprocate and be helpful to you. I encourage individuals to mentor others. That's one of the things that you can do. Yes, sir, you have a question?
How would you do that, like, practically now as a student? Offer a company something.
Here's a great example right here. You can mentor others. So you and I'm a little older than you. But there's things that I'm trying to learn and understand about people that are 10 or 15 years younger than me and how to best inspire them. One of the ways to do that is for us to have that type of dialogue. So I talked about my former chief of staff who liked a lot of feedback. Well, one of the things that we used to do is we would talk, help me understand how to be a better leader for people like you. And so we would have, that was a gift, right? So clearly a person that's senior or more established doesn't have the same needs as you might as a person that's earlier in your career, but there are things that we do need. And so the way to create that advantage is to find a way to tap into something that he or she needs, offer that, and then very quickly that person will flip and then help you, because they can help you 10x in what you can help them, but they're just so grateful that you actually try to help them. It just doesn't happen. I will say I spend my whole day sifting through people asking me for stuff. Starts in the morning with my 2 children, and then and then it goes all day, right? All day. And so when that one email comes of something genuinely to help me, I stop and read it and wow, and then I instantly flip to try to figure out, well, how can I help them? And more often than not, I can tend to be able to help them in a bigger way than they help me, but I'm just so appreciative. It's a really big tip because most people spend their time looking for something. And so when you reverse that, it opens up doors in so many ways. Start with, and sometimes for a person that's very successful, what they like to do is give advice. They don't want to be your mentor, but they'll give you 30 minutes and a cup of coffee. And then they might decide to spend more time with you. So when people go way over here to be my mentor, I don't know you, it's too much. 30 minutes and a cup of coffee for me to ask you 3 questions about why you're so great. Yeah, why not? Sure. Right? Was there another hand up? I thought. Okay. I talk about this in the book, this idea of silver talent. And so this just gets into, you guys aren't going to be as excited about this, but as it gets into thinking about different labor pools. So we have a pool of people that are retiring, but are living much longer. And so they have this gap, and whether it's for financial reasons or whether it's for the desire to just continue to contribute. So you have people that will have worked a full 25, 30-year career that are going to re-enter the workforce and work again for another 5 or 10 years. And so it's creating some interesting dynamics. So employers are starting to look to this pool because they're saying, again, I'm struggling to find talent, so I'll tap into some of these people that are looking for a second career. But it's creating some interesting dynamics because now you have the 30-year-old manager that's got a 60-year-old direct report that's already worked a career, that was a vice president, that's now an analyst. How's that work? And so it's creating different pressure for that silver talent that's re-entering the workforce. It's creating some different pressure for that early manager that's managing a very experienced person. So some of the social dynamics that are being created are quite unique. So something to think about. You don't have to worry about this one too much yet, but I guarantee you as you move into the workplace, the idea of the person that's the youngest is the entry level, and then the next in the middle, and then the older person is the most senior, is totally getting mixed up. So there'll be mixes of backgrounds and ages. So this is a different type of diversity that the workforce is starting to have to work through and manage. So it might be something for you to think about in the future. The new hiring process. This one is it's always fun. So you guys are real tech savvy and use all the different tools, and there's something coming out every week that I'm always behind. But the use of psychometric testing, social media crawling, online video interviewing, all of these things is already starting to completely revolutionize the way we get connected to jobs. So we're moving into a world where literally, we have how many people have a LinkedIn profile? We all have a LinkedIn profile. And so It's funny because you guys aren't all working yet, but when I do this in a professional setting, I always say, so how many people here have a profile on Monster? And they all have jobs, so they don't put their hand up. And then I say, well, how many people have a profile on LinkedIn? They all put their hand up. I said, what's the difference between Monster and LinkedIn? None. It's just Monster calls itself a job board. And so you know if you put your hand up, your boss is saying, hey, why is your information on Monster? You're looking for a job. But when you put your information on LinkedIn, it's the same information, but it's a networking site. Right? Same information. So they did a much better job marketing. So we all gladly put our stuff on LinkedIn. We all talk about it. At work, we talk about our LinkedIn profile. Have you updated it? No one questions whether you're looking for a job or not, but that's exactly what LinkedIn is. Now, what's happening is, so we have now all put our resumes on LinkedIn, and we're moving into a world where jobs are being pushed against that profile, right? And then you'll get an email, hey, you're a 20% match for this job. Are you interested in it? If so, click here. And when you click here, here's 3 questions to answer. Hey, based on your answers to those questions, you're now a 40% fit for this job. Are you still interested? Click here. If you click here, here's this game we want you to play for the next week. And then you play this game. Hey, you're now a 60% fit for this job. Click here. Point the phone at yourself and FaceTime and answer these 3 questions. Hey, you're now an 80% fit for this job. If you're still interested, click here. That's the world we're moving into. And so by the time you actually move into the office to quote unquote interview, they already know whether they want you or not. You've played the game, which is thrown off information. You've taken the test or answered the questions, which is thrown off information. They've actually videoed you and seen your face, which is thrown off data. And so we can take you about 85, 90% through the process. And by the time you walk in, so long as you can chew gum and don't trip over yourself, you'll get the offer. Right? That all exists today. They just haven't pulled the ecosystem together. Now, in writing this book, I talked about 60 companies with technologies in this space. There are a couple things to be wary of. So one, every single company that came and talked to me said that their test, their video tool, their thing was the one thing that you needed to assess all talent. And that's what's wrong. I don't believe that any one thing has kind of captured the corner on being able to really paint a full picture on everyone's talent or capability. What I do believe is that if you stack 2 or 3 or 4 of these things on top of each other, they can get pretty doggone close. So that's one. So you're going to have to embrace these tools and these tests because they're coming and there's going to be more of them. I'm just glad I'm old. I don't have to do this stuff. You guys will. And so you want to think about that. I'll give you 2 examples just to give you a sense of what's coming here. So company out of Boston, Harvard professor quits his job, decides he can solve the talent problem through math. Starts this company. He starts with hospitals, entry-level jobs, high turnover jobs. He creates 2 data points. So one is a test, and the other one is a profile that's created off of your ethos in the internet. That's the part that's scary. Right? So I asked him about that. It's some kind of algorithm that he wouldn't tell me about, but he goes out into the ethos and they create a profile on you based on stuff out here in the internet. Okay, that's the part that should scare you. Okay, I don't know what you guys are doing, but just keep that in mind. So they, based on these 2 data points, he says we can be 85% predictive of job fit. So the proof is in the pudding. So he applied it to 4 hospitals. So the test and the profile. And in those 4 hospitals, they were able to reduce turnover without doing anything funny to salaries or anything like that, between 44 and 56%. Now, in the business I was in, if I could walk in and say I could reduce your turnover 10 or 20%, I could name my price. Well, if you can do anything close to 50%, I'll give you, my left and right arm. And so they were at the point when I met them, we're trying to scale that. And so what they're suggesting is the 45-minute interview is a very inefficient way to assess your talent, capability, and job fit, but every company does it. And so what happens is I hire you based on my personal filter, my energy, I like your jacket, whatever. And those things they don't work. these tools are much more predictive. So companies are going to start relying on them more and more. Okay, second one. Met with a company. So after 9/11, a lot of work went into creating these systems to do facial recognition. And sometimes you're in the airport and these people get randomly pulled out of line. Well, what I've learned is that it's not so random. So your face throws off cues, and they can be predictive of people that have malintent. And so sometimes these random selections aren't very random. Your face is suggesting that you have some bad things in play. That one's not too funny, actually. So these guys that did some of this, I think decided they felt a little guilty. They wanted to actually use their skills for something maybe a little more positive. So they were doing facial recognition software that would be predictive of health ailments. And so these guys can predict Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease based off of some data that they can collect from video of your face. As they were putting this tool together, they were also finding that this data was throwing off insights into someone's leadership capabilities and how they show up as a person, which was not the business they were in. So they brought it to me. I was scheduled to meet with them for an hour. I met with them for about 4. I was so fascinated and freaked out by this. So imagine a world where, again, you're a 60% match for this job. Point the phone at yourself, answer these 3 questions. So not only do I get the answers to your questions, I get a sense of your leadership style and capability, and I can predict whether you're going to get sick. What do I do with that? That's the world we're moving towards. And the questions that get teed up are, too much to think about right now, but imagine that. This person's perfect for the job. They're going to be sick in 2 years. What do you do? I'll give you a real life example of this. I told you this story already. So when I worked in Turkey, worked for Coca-Cola, I'm in my office. Finance manager comes in. Orlando, one of my employees, their mother is sick, has to have an operation, and we'd love to, do a blood drive, get blood from employees in case there's any problems. I say, great, no problem. We'll send out an email, and we can encourage people to give blood. I said, no. Orlando, so-and-so's mother is type A. We should just contact the employees with type A blood. Well, how are we going to do that? Well, we can just get it off the blood report. I said, blood report? I said, could you excuse me for a minute? So I kind of yelled down the hall, hey, get in here. So I have all my employees come in here. I say, do we have people's blood type? Like, oh yeah, on the blood report. You want us to run it? No. Why do we have people's blood? Well, in Turkey, you have to do a pre-employment screen like a lot of companies, but whoever pays for the doctor's visit owns the data. So after you get your pre-employment physical and walk out, they have this report. They'd send it to the office. They'd create a file, popped it in. So we had everybody's blood type. Great, thanks for answering that. Now, why is this so casually known? Because the guy kind of sauntered in my office like, hey, could you run the blood report? So clearly they'd used this before. So they tell me a story. 2 years before, so-and-so's mom was sick, same thing. She was type O, and they ran the blood report. They went back to the employee, here are all the people that gave, here are all the people that didn't. The employee called, thank you for giving to my mom, and you. How could you not give blood to my dear old mother? Now I'm having a bit of a reaction, as you can imagine, but in this particular part of the world, that was the norm. So we changed the policy and destroyed the blood report. But the point is, right, so in this country, at this particular time, that was how information was used. We made a decision to change it. But this access to data and information is definitely creating some very different scenarios for how we're going to be looking at each other in terms of our talent, our capabilities, what they do and don't do. And so it's something for you to be aware of. Everything you do is in play. Every opportunity, all the interactions that you're having now will influence your longer story. And so those are all things that you want to think about. Okay. You guys have any questions? Yes.
Yeah. So as someone who would like to work internationally, Um, what do you suggest going the best way to go about that? Would it be finding a specific company that would potentially be able to put you in another location, or gaining skills like right out of college locally that you could transfer over to international jobs? Like what is your
Yeah, so there's no simple answer. It's expensive to send employees over. So you want to look at companies where that's a big part of what they do. So for me, like when I went to Coca-Cola, that was intentional because I knew Coca-Cola in this instance had a philosophy where they liked people to work internationally. So I knew that the likelihood of me getting an international assignment went up with that particular company. So that influenced that decision. Consulting is something to consider because you work on these different projects and they're 3 months or 6 months or a year in duration. And so as a part of your profile, you might say going in, hey, I want to consult, but I also want to work internationally. So the mistake I made, don't do this. So I minored in Spanish. I asked to go to a Spanish speaking country and they sent me to French speaking Quebec. So it didn't exactly work, but it was still international. I lived in Canada for a couple of years early on in my career. So you may want to think about that, but I would encourage you to do anything you can do to get you on that path, even the way you vacation, the way you travel, all tell stories. Because a lot of people say they want to go international. People look at everything. So you want to go international, do you have a passport? Well, no. So I don't believe you, you know what I mean? Everything plays. So you set the stage now. So if you don't have a passport, get a passport. It's funny because as an HR person, a person would come in and they'd say, oh yeah, love international, want to go international. So my first question was, do you have a passport? And they'd say no. Dude, you're not serious. You don't even have a passport. You can't even go to Canada. Right? Everything plays, so you got to think about it. If that's something that you want to do, the way you live your life will tell me. So you vacation, I traveled here, I went here, or I visited a family, whatever. Those are all small cues that would make me believe that you really do want an international assignment. And so when one comes about, I'd be more likely to send you than your colleague that doesn't even have a passport, even though you're both saying definitely want international. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. What other questions? Yes, ma'am.
What if you're not looking to be hired like in the U.S. to be sent on an international project, but like within another country?
You want to go directly to another country
Yeah.
and get hired in? Yeah, so that's actually easier to do because it's cheaper. Because when I send and I take a U.S.-based person and put them on an expat assignment, that's expensive. So if you have skills that would allow you to be hired directly into pick a part of the world, absolutely. Same thing. So you might apply for a company that has offices in different locations and see how you could apply directly into that office, or whether it's a corporation or some type of consulting firm or some other type of business. And if there was a way to work directly, you'll have to probably ask that question because the people that would come here to recruit or that you'll bump into here are here looking for people in the U.S., but they could help you navigate to go directly into a part of the world that would be of interest to you. And most companies would be excited about that because you'll bring the dual threat, because you'll have the U.S. background and hopefully some of the background of the country that you want to get into. So, yes, ma'am.
What are some ways that you have implemented TalentISM at Holland America, and what have the impacts on the company been?
Well, I've been there 10 months, so I'd say we're still kind of seeing some of the impacts. But some of this psychometric testing that I alluded to, we're instituting within Holland America. So what I say is, I want to get more than my fair share of the people that are oriented to being in a service job. So when running a cruise line, one of the big differentiators is service. And so it's a unique person that wants to leave their family, get on a cruise ship, travel around the world for 9 months, being in complete service to random people every week, and sending money home. Anybody want that job? And so, but that's what I need in order for the experience on my ship to be better than the next option. So we've got wonderful hiring practices already. We've been in business for 142 years, so clearly we've been doing it pretty good, but I want to make it even better by, again, stacking on top of it some of these tools that we've talked about to get even more than my fair share of the people that are perfectly wired for some of these jobs, because I believe that human capital is the differentiator in any business, but particularly in a service-oriented business like mine. And so that's how we're doing some of that. What else you got? Yes, ma'am.
So you said that like the human capital part and like knowing your networks and knowing how big a person's network is. What are some ways that employers are figuring that out, like when they're hiring someone?
Yeah, I mean, so you got, social media makes things pretty easy now, right? So there are algorithms that are sort of being created. So this research that's being done at NYU is trying to figure out the best ways to do that. But right now, everybody, I'm on LinkedIn. I have this many people that are connected to me. I have this many people connected to me on Facebook. Now, how much of that is real versus not? And there's some things that they're trying to source and figure out. But even in the way somebody might interview you, because historically we've interviewed for skills. Tell me about a time when you demonstrated leadership capability in this environment. Tell me about a time when you had to make a tough decision. So those are skills assessments. Different. Tell me about how you would make this type of decision tapping into some of the people in your network. If you had to do something you've never done before, who is the first person that you might call to help you sort and figure that out? It's a completely different way of interviewing. So what you'll see is there'll be people that will want to test you for skills because there's something that we need you to do, but there will also be people that are going to assess and evaluate how you tap into your circle of influence to execute and deliver. And some people will be able to do that better than others. There are some people that answer those questions about themselves. Well, the best way I would do that is I'd first figure it out myself and then I'd go do it. No. Who else would you use? And some people can't do that because they're oriented around self as instrument. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Is this going to make it harder for introverts in the workplace? I mean, there's always been a tendency to favor extroverts in interviewing, right? Interviews favor extroverts because they tend to present well.
Actually, I don't think so.
You don't think so?
I actually think, so the difference between an extrovert and introvert, extroverts may have large networks, but they may not be very deep. Introverts can have a tighter network, but much deeper. It's about the ability to tap into the network and have it execute and deliver. So,
How companies measure that?
well, that's what some of the research is. That's what they're trying to figure it out. So, I mean, this is new. I'm giving you stuff that's just now starting to happen, where they're asking the question about your network. But I can tell you, it's not just about volume. One of the challenges, with LinkedIn and some of these things, it was meant to be a true networking. So I was only supposed to link in with people that I sort of knew. And what's happening is everyone just links in with everybody. So they've got people with lots of people connected to them, not a lot of value, maybe because they're not real connections. So not only the number of connections, but the strength of the connection and the amount of influence and power that can come from the connection. So I might argue your introverts could have some advantage as this starts to get sorted out, because your introverts will tend to have a more real network that they can tap into. All right, it's the time of both my sons are pretty big personalities. I don't know where they get it from, but they've got and they're struggling with this now as young people. Is it the volume of connections or the quality of connections? And so there's a kid, his name's Brandon, that I have to describe. So my son's like 6'2", 220, big strapping kid. He's 15. He's going to be about 6'6", and big athlete. And so you can kind of create the profile. But he's kind of a nerd at heart, and so he's got a little buddy that was kind of his nerdy buddy that he would protect when they were little. And so Brandon now lives in Japan. I was on an assignment in Japan, so Orlando wanted to go see him. I said, yeah, definitely go see Brandon. That kid's going to create some kind of internet startup. You want to do the commercials, stay connected to him. Right? So when you see the two of them together, my son and Brandon, they don't look like they go together, but they're good friends. But that's an example. That's a real network. My son could easily get caught up in the hundreds of people that follow him around because he has that, but I'm really proud of him for keeping that real relationship, and that's going to add more value to him over time than the hundreds of people that are following him around because he looks cool. I think that's what it's about. Okay. All right. I got time for one more if there's another hot burning question. Yes, ma'am.
I have a burning question. What motivates you? You're so motivated and so successful in your career. I know it's not easy.
That's a good question. So I was asked a question once, because I think it's different over time. So I got assessed. I went through an assessment process. I was at Ameritech, and I had one of the vice presidents took a liking to me, and so he was assessing all of his direct reports. I was an analyst level at the time. He said, "Orlando, I want you to go through this." So he threw me into the mix with all these pretty senior people. And so, and at the time I was 27, and I was a director at Ameritech. I was the youngest director in the company. I had about 50 employees. So I was kind of already sort of on my way. And the guy says, "Well, Orlando, you've clearly been very focused on being successful in this early part of your career." He says, "Is it better to be successful or to be great?" And I kind of had to think about that one, because what I had realized is my whole measurement system up until that point was around roles and jobs and money and cars and clothes and suits. I still like all that, but I also learned that I needed to think about sort of this legacy and once you do all of that, what's it to what end? And that's what sort of drives me to write the book. I do a lot of public speaking like this, and I do a lot of advising and counseling. I've been pretty fortunate in the way my life and my career's turned out, and so I also feel part of my accountability is to share some of that and be helpful to others. And so I think those are the two things that drive me. I like to win, so and I like challenges. So when somebody walks in, I'll tell you this story. So the opportunity comes to go to Turkey, and I told you I had to choose between London and Turkey. I chose Turkey on the spot. This is a Friday afternoon. Now, I have a wife and 2 kids. I kind of should have talked to them, right? So I come home, I bust in the house. Now, we had moved to Atlanta. We had built this house from the ground up. We'd been in the house maybe 7, 8 months. Just finished the pool, beautiful house. I come in, I say, "Honey, guess what? We got the call. We're going international." Okay. So she says, "Okay, well, where are we going?" I say, "Guess." That was my other mistake. So she starts guessing. So she's like, "London, no. Hong Kong, no. Mexico City, no. Paris, no. Italy, no. Venice, no." She's naming all the sexy cities. No. So after like the 8th city, she says, "Well, where are we going?" I said, "Well, what do you think about Istanbul?" She says, "I don't," and walks out. That was Friday. But by Monday, we were going. We were good. Cost me. It cost me. But it was actually the best thing that we did, personally and professionally. So it played out. So I've just liked challenges. So moved my family to Turkey, moved back to the U.S. to take on a CHRO job. I was CHRO of Marsh & McLennan Companies at 39 years old. It's a Fortune 220 company. Was doing that. My boss said, "Orlando, you don't want to do HR for the next 25 years. You could be CEO." I said, I'm kind of cool. This is a good job." And so he started giving me things. At 42, I was running a business. 42, I joined my first publicly traded board. And then I took this job and decided to join the cruise industry. And so 46, I jump into a completely new industry. So part of what motivates me is just I like challenge. And I like to see if I can figure it out and turn something that's good into something that's great. And then hopefully helping some people along the way. So that is me. So hopefully this has been helpful to you. It's been a fast hour, but appreciate your time, energy, and attention, and best of luck to you.
The School of Business, Government, and Economics at Ashford University. We really want to thank you for your time coming out today, and we have a small token of appreciation here. Let's thank him again.
Thank you. Yeah, my pleasure.